Good afternoon all. To the speakers and musicians gathered here in the Monash Religious Centre in Melbourne, and to those joining us via the live stream link. Welcome to this, a celebration of the life and achievements of the distinguished and much loved Basoeki Koesasi, Pak Bas, as we fondly recall him. My name is Paul Ramage. I work closely with Pak Bas in the formative years of the Australia-Indonesia Centre, and it is a great honour to assist with today's service. I begin by paying my respects to the traditional owners of this land, the people of the Kulin Nations. On this day, in this multi-faith centre, I acknowledge the many people of Indonesia, our neighbours, our great friends. And I acknowledge the members of the Koesasi family in Australia and in Indonesia. And of course, distinguished colleagues and friends from around the world. We come together today to collectively pay our respects to Pak Bas, who died in Melbourne on December 10 last year. He was a proud family man, a proud Indonesian, a proud Australian, a passionate and a highly effective teacher of language and culture, a mentor, a tireless exemplar of cross-cultural relationship building, and an inspiration to generations of students and colleagues in academia, business, government, the arts, and beyond. Pak Bas, born in Metro Lampung, Sumatra, on 14th of July 1946, 11 months after the proclamation of Indonesian independence, was 74 years old. With more than 40 years' service at Monash University, Pak Bas's legacies are many. In fact, if you have studied Indonesian at Monash, you have likely studied under Pak Bas. He touched people from all walks of life, from presidents and prime ministers, sultans, CEOs, rectors and deans, to doctors, surgeons, anaesthetists, disaster relief experts, musicians, artists, and of course, students, researchers and educators. We will hear from some of his former students today. We will be reminded in a program that includes a performance, numerous tributes, and photographs of Pak Bas in action that we have lived in the times of an amazing man. Pak Bas was a master of 1.5-track diplomacy, connecting people on both sides of the Timor Sea with ease and tenaciously advocating to bring the two countries closer together. If the quality of your life ultimately depends on the quality of your relationships, about how you treated the people around you and how you made them feel, then Pak Bas succeeded admirably. In essence, he helped Monash University orient towards Indonesia with respect, and in doing so, he built a culture of relational trust and mutuality that endures today. This great skill was on show when Pak Bas helped me set up an Indonesian alumni advisory board for Monash in 2012. No sooner had the concept been mentioned to Pak Bas than he had a who's who list of board prospects. Mahendra Siragar, Dewi Fortuna Anwar, Aziz Amin, Ketut Marjana, and on the list went. One name, for protocol reasons, was missing: Vice President Budiono. But not for long. With Pak Bas working the phones, and with the commitment of then Vice-Chancellor Professor Ed Byrne and Deputy Vice-Chancellor Professor Abid Khan, a ceremony in February 2013 to confer an honorary doctorate on the Vice President became a national red carpet celebration. Of the type, I might add, befitting of the inauguration of a president. Monash was the toast of Jakarta. Australia and Indonesia were together as one. Pak Bas, the backroom fixer, our team coach, had pulled off a coup. This was very much indicative of the Pak Bas I knew, always going that little bit further, giving a little bit more than was asked of him, working for others rather than for himself, standing up for what he believed in. On a personal level, to those of us who brought the Australia-Indonesia Centre to life, Pak Bas was our inspiration, our sage, our mentor, our spiritual leader. He was humble, overflowing with humility and humanity, a friendly ear, a fascinating storyteller, a mate in the truest sense of the word. In those years, it might have been easy for some to think that Pak Bas was my sidekick. In fact, I was Pak Bas's sidekick. When we longed for a spark, a new dawn, Pak Bas was there, battle-weary, but battle-wise. It was his context book, his kindness, and his warmth that empowered us and made us believe. Both nations are so fortunate that in Pak Bas we had such an effective advocate for the red of Indonesia and the green and gold of Australia. I could imagine that Australian journalist Julia Baird, author of the top-selling book Phosphorescence, would say that Pak Bas had a light within, a light that shone brightly and warmly for so many people of different classes. Pak Bas's light shone in English and Bahasa Indonesia, at universities in Australia and Indonesia, and indeed in the UK, with diplomats and foreign affairs leaders in Jakarta, Bandung, Bogor, Yogyakarta, Surabaya, Makassar, and many cities and villages in between, and of course, across Australia. The light within Pak Bas for Australia and Indonesia shone when other lights had gone out or they were faltering. It even shone, bless him, when our wheels were wilting in the heat and craziness of many a Jakarta traffic jam. All of this from a smiling, friendly and gentle man, distinguished with a beard reminiscent of the American Civil War and with snappy suits, and equally dapper with his cloth caps, batik accessories and exotic charm. Pak Bas was on the side of the angels, but there was a lovely bit of rascal in him as well. I still don't know how I ended up being in the limelight alongside an ornately adorned bride and groom at a formal, massive wedding in Jakarta. Baz just winked at me when the host announced, "Can we please invite Pa Paul and Pak Bas to the stage?" Many a delightful story will be told about Pak Bas, his love of people, food, art, fashion, music. He could, I'm told, do a mighty good impersonation of Louis Armstrong. Former President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, who awarded Bas with a Star of Service, said when visiting Australia in 2010, "I look forward to a day when leaders all over the world take a good look at the things we are doing so well together, and they will say, these two used to be worlds apart, but they now have a fair dinkum partnership." I can say with confidence that Basoeki Koesasi was the embodiment of Yudhoyono's vision. He was one of the most fair dinkum of Indonesians. It was Pak Bas's relationship of trust with the Sultan of Yogyakarta that saw members of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra travel several times to Indonesia. In August 2017, MSO musicians performed at the stunning Prambanan Temple in Yogyakarta following a week of workshops and rehearsals with local music students. It was a magical experience. At another camp in 2018, a Javanese folk song, arranged by Maestro Budi Nugra, Gambang Suling, was performed. As former MSO executive Gabby Waters recalls, the MSO would not have been in a position to have this incredible relationship without the influence and guiding hand of Pak Bas. He was such a dear friend to the MSO. With us from the MSO to perform Gambang Suling are Sarah Kuro and Kirsten Kenny on violin, Gabrielle Halloran on viola, Rowan DeCourt on cello, and Steve Reeves on double bass, the MSO Quintet. Thank you so much. I can share with you here in the wood-panelled Monash Religious Centre that performance produced goosebumps for all of us. A very, very special performance. Now joining us via video is Ibu Speaker Tutu Hatu Niwa, the Indonesian Consul General, to say a few words on behalf of the Indonesian government.
I firstly known Pak Basoeki Koesasi around 2005-2006 when we worked together on an issue of interfaith dialogue. He was known as a passionate man about Indonesia and Australia relations, and he was like a guardian of the bridge of Indonesia and Australia. Many of Indonesians and Australians are here today because of his works, his dedication, and his commitment. I personally, with the family of the Consulate General of the Republic of Indonesia in Melbourne, we are sad of his passing. But I believe that he would love for us to celebrate his life and his legacy by continuously working together for the betterment of the relationship of Indonesia and Australia. Thank you, Pak Bas. May God grant you the best place in his house and give comforts to the family of yours. Terima kasih dan selamat jalan.
Again, thank you very much, Ibu Speaker. Pak Bas, of course, was ever the networker within Indonesian government circles, and he would have appreciated those kind words in a great deal. At Monash University, on this campus here in Clayton, and of course at Caulfield, Pak Bas was a constant presence for decades. And by the way, if you're joining us from Caulfield, we send you a wave. To acknowledge Pak Bas's contribution to the Faculty of Arts, I invite Professor Julian Milley to be followed by Jacinta Kurniasa to speak about Pak Bas and the Faculty of Arts. Thank you.
Greetings, everybody, and I want to extend sincere condolences to Bus's family and friends. I stand before you as Bus's student, and I also speak on behalf of the Monash Indonesian program, where I now work alongside my colleague Jacinta Kurniasi, and also on behalf of the School of Languages, Cultures and Literatures and Linguistics, where Bus spent almost all of his long career. I turned up to Monash to study as a first-year student in 1986, and Bus was my teacher in beginner's Indonesian. I have to work hard to remember any other teacher that I had in semester 1 of 1986, but I remember Bus with incredible clarity. For one thing, he looked great. He had long hair, and he was cultivating the look of this wayang trickster. At one moment trickster, the other moment mystic. But when he began to speak in vernacular tones about football results, it became at one moment an image of the Buddha and the next moment Shirley Strawn. And for an ultra-straight 18-year-old fresh out of school, this was definitely what I needed. And other teachers in the Indonesian program had a similar effect. I can remember David Hill was wearing a kaftan, and I thought, this is a good place for me right now. But one of the real reasons for Bus's impact was the many roles he easily and enthusiastically assumed, and I'm going to recall some of them, and I'm sure that there'll be some familiarity with people attending this gathering. First, he was a great Indonesian teacher. I learnt easily from Bus. He followed the textbook closely and gave clear instruction. He didn't need to be concerned about research because at the time things were a little different institutionally, and the Indonesian program was flush with world-renowned researchers. Professor Skinner had just passed away the year before, I think it was 1985. There was Barbara Hatley, Paul Tickle, Rabin Hajadibrata, David Hill was teaching in the program. They were all amazing researchers. And elsewhere in the faculty were Mel Rickletts, John Legg, Sue Blackburn, Herb Feith, Penny Graham, and others. Of course, Margaret was in the early years of her career. So Bus was enabled to fulfil his vocation as a teacher, and I found him to be an excellent one. And his teaching vocation included study tours, and I'll mention those again later. A second role was he took his role as a mediator beyond language teaching. He was Monash's celebrity chef. He held cooking demonstrations that were very well attended on campus in the Menzies building. Can you imagine open flames in the Menzies building? People love them. My memory could be wrong, but I think they were eventually shifted down to the football club change rooms or the sports centre down there, probably for safety reasons, but people loved them. Thirdly, he was always ready to lighten the mood by playing a kind of clown role, but I say that in a very serious way. It's very important for institutions like Monash, where we perhaps lack such roles in the present climate. To lighten the mood is a practice of inclusion. You didn't have to work hard to persuade Bas to do a James Brown impression or to strip off his shirt on the niches of the Buddha's images that surround the Borobudur temple and take a Buddha position there to be photographed by everyone passing. I have such a photo, I'm sure others do. He was always ready to lighten the mood, and he had the skill to do that. Another role, he took his role seriously as a friend and helper for Indonesian students who came to Monash as postgrads, many of whom were my friends at the time. Bas was very kind to them and extended to them many opportunities, and this was not forgotten by them. When I travelled with Bas in Java, wherever he went, he was able to ask favours from these people and receive much warm hospitality from them. For all these reasons and more, Bas became the face of Monash in Indonesia and the face of Indonesia at Monash, a kind of celebrity figure, and Monash has benefited richly from that image. So it wasn't surprising when Bas wished to travel to Bandung from Melbourne, a city a couple of 100 kilometres from the airport in Jakarta, a car was always arranged to collect him and bring him from Jakarta to Bandung. This was an honour not extended to Monash staff far above him on the academic hierarchy, which I think is a telling point about the value of relationship building as Bas understood it. I mentioned earlier the study tours, and the ones Bas organised were extraordinary. I attended one in, I think, 1987, maybe October, and Jane Koesasi also attended that trip. Because of his amazing connections, we had privileged access everywhere. So we didn't just visit the television studios of TVRI. We were personally greeted by director Teguh Karya there. We personally met the painter Afandi in his studio near Jogja. We were matched with host families in at least 2 cities. We attended a wayang topping performance near Cirebon. That was a rare honour, and a kuda lumping performance near Kediri. Both of those experiences alone would have justified the trip. And for me, this was the Indonesian experience that I'm sure many of you watching would have also experienced. Here was I, a native of one of the most prosperous and privileged national environments ever constructed by humans, arriving in a Jakarta teeming with humans at the opposite end of the wealth spectrum, but with an oversupply of humanity and brilliance. So when I arrived back from that trip, I changed my arts major, which had been in classical studies, to Indonesian studies. And the next year, I took 3 friends on a repeat of the same trip. So you can see that Bas was very influential in my journey, which has brought me to fill the academic role alongside Jacinta that he himself played, which is a tremendous challenge and honour. Although you won't find any James Brown impressions in the Indonesian department as it currently is. I want to close by mentioning the most profound lesson that Bas taught me that goes well beyond Indonesian language and culture. The Bas that I first got to know in 1986 was a virtuoso in Australian culture. That made him memorable at Monash and in Melbourne and internationally. And it made him immediately intelligible to me. So when he first arrived in Australia, although I was not there at the time, Bas obviously did not regard Australian language and customs as things to be respected and tiptoed around. Rather, he treated them as things to be mastered and enjoyed. And that itself, I think, is a good lesson. He knew how to connect. He knew how to relax the mood. But after lengthy travelling in Indonesia with Bas, a different figure was revealed to me. One who had an acute knowledge of social hierarchies and the appropriate ways of speaking within those hierarchies. And indeed, the ways Bas interacted with Indonesians demonstrated how important those hierarchies are in Indonesian culture, and he could sometimes appear short or even harsh towards some of his interlocutors. Once he said to me, "Julian, in Indonesia, you never call me Bas, you should call me Pak Bas." And that kind of imperative was really not Bas's style here in Australia. And I spoke about this with Bas, and he said, "Well, this is a lesson for you, Julian. None of this, the study tour, the relationships, the favours, the cars would be possible if I did not know how to make the distinctions that you're talking about. Hierarchies need to be respected with proper language. Bas said this was a good lesson for me in my journey of studying Indonesia. But when I add to that knowledge my familiarity of Bas's mastery of Australian culture, it seems to me perhaps it's more of a lesson about life anywhere. So as a teacher in the broad sense, Bas was a very significant influence on me, and he'll be much missed.
I wish to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in Indonesia. Saya mengakui bahwa bangsa Kulin adalah pemilik tanah sejati, tanah di mana kita berkumpul pada hari ini. Hormat saya kepada tetua-tetua adat, baik yang sudah mendahului kita maupun yang sekarang hadir di antara kita. My small reflections will go beyond arts faculty, Monash University, where Pak Bas began his career, and it will have two important ingredients of Basoeki Koesasi life, which are his love of his children and grandchildren, family, and his two favorite words, Australia and Indonesia. These were reflected in his work, especially his time in the Indonesian studies as a language promoter and educator, something we both share. His first 10 years, at least, focused on the promotions of language teaching. As a newbie in the Faculty of Arts, I watched, observed, listened, took note, and learned. And I become not only one of his colleagues, as well as a student. Let me describe what his class was like. There were laughs. James Brown impressions, I can do that, Julian. Lots of them, screams, growls, jokes, mostly coming from him. Picture this. My very first office was in S508. His first and last, one of his last office was in S507 on the 5th floor at Menzies Building. At that time, the classroom were located in the middle of the floor, surrounded by the staff offices. For some magical reasons, our classes were always scheduled in the rooms right in front of our offices. Because there were no windows, normally we let the door open. So you could hear everything, and I mean everything. Joel, it's pronounced nekat, N-E-K-A-D, and he spelled it. Not naked, N-A-K-E-D, and he spelled it. Both words have exactly the same letters. Nekat is bold or daring in Indonesians, while naked, well, we know what it means, but that's him. And then some other time you would hear, repeat after me, class. Saya belajar bahasa Indonesia. The key word is belajar. And then he would spell it. B-E-L-A-J-A-R. Eat lots of chili and you get that right. Not belajar. That would be you all if you don't do what I teach you. Not belajar. Pronunciation is important. Spelling is important. Being a good speaker is important. That's what he taught me. But that's him again. Friendly, or young people call him super friendly, outgoing, loved to joke. He enjoyed teaching, and the students enjoyed his teaching too, before he moved into different area of work at Monash University. And as a newbie in the arts faculty and Indonesian studies, Monash University, I learned from him of those what to do and what not to do. Believe me. He initiated teachers training and retraining program, both in Australia and Indonesia, in connections with Department of Education, in-country program, visited schools in rural Victoria for language and culture events. Pak Bas was fluent in Javanese, all levels. And knowing me as a native Javanese newbie, this little brown girl from Java, he loved talking to me in Javanese. For him, he thought it was the best way to argue and disagree with me, respectfully, not realizing that from my point of view, as a feminist Javanese poetess, I could speak to him in polite High Javanese, but stern. He was fluent also in Sundanese, Bahasa Gaul, very formal Indonesians for us, Indonesian in Australia, who are always conscious whether our English is good enough. He was our good example, that confident, we all know that. He was fond of using some other regional languages to speak, tell jokes. Did I mention jokes? Yes, he loved telling jokes. Some were a bit, how do I say it, too risky. And I had to reprimand him in my High Javanese, polite yet stern way, Pak Bas. But the favorite part of his classes, the end of the program party. Nasi kuning, opor ayam, rendang, acar, tempe goreng, sambal goreng, ati, and kerupuk, all kinds of Indonesian crackers. Crackers is the translations of kerupuk. At Monash Open Day, which was organized by Faculty of Arts, one of the most well-attended events at that time was Indonesian lunch, organized by him. He cooked everything from scratch. You could smell the aromatic mix of ginger, lemongrass, garlic, coconut milk, palm sugar, chilies from distance. The whole floor was covered with this amazing smell. And the Indonesian lunch event would go on in 15 minutes. And because for him, it was more than work, it was personal, official, and spiritual, I would say. He mixed all of the loves that he had. And which bring us to some of the biggest love of his life. Catherine, Jane, Anthony, Joseph, Xavier, Eamon, and Cecilia. I got to meet and get to know them at work. He took them to work here at Clayton and COVID sometime and took them to a trip to Indonesia. There was not a single day when he did not call me Jeng. That's the only word that he used to call me. It means dear Jeng or little sister. From his office, and showed me the photos of Catherine's wedding. A handsome photo of Anthony in traditional outfit. His endless updates of the school stories, taekwondo, because I'm also doing taekwondo, the birth of the new grandchildren. His office was full of the pictures of them, so he can show me and keep me updated. He was proud of them. They study, work, social activism. I remember Jane and Anthony took some of the Indonesian classes at Monash. So, to dear Catherine, Jane, Anthony, Joseph, Xavier, Eamon, Cecilia, I'd like to say this. I see him, his love connections to both Australia and Indonesia in all of you. Always. a fond memory which will stay for a long time. But please, don't tell him. Honestly, you are all a better version of him. I love you all. My final words of goodbyes as Jeng, because that's the only way he always called me. Ndereke sugeng kondur Pak Bas, hatur nuwun, matur nuwun, terima kasih Pak Bas, and behave yourself up there. Please be safe everyone. Thank you. Pakai masker, mask on.
Well, they were real stories, so genuine, so heartfelt, so gorgeous in many ways. Thank you so much to Julian and Jacinta. Pak Bas, of course, had the most wonderful smile and a wardrobe of batik that was the envy of many. But it was his ability to forge friendships and win respect that marked him out, as the following presentation prepared by the Australia-Indonesia Centre team demonstrates so powerfully. Wow, so many wonderful images, so many gorgeous tributes. I'm sure Buzz's family, friends and colleagues will be so honoured by those words. At his core, Pak Bas was a teacher and arguably one of the most successful proponents of what these days is referred to as knowledge diplomacy. Here to share his insights into Pak Bas's time as a scholar is someone who knew him very well, fellow academic, Professor Greg Barton.
It's a sad moment to come here and be part of this service to remember Bas. It's an honour. There are so many other people who could speak about him, and we've heard wonderful accounts from Paul and Jacinta and from Julian. It's hard to add any more, except to emphasise the fact that, yes, Bas was here for 40 decades as a teacher of the Indonesian language, but he was much more than a language teacher. He was a gifted teacher. As Julian explained, he had a natural flair for teaching. I didn't experience the lessons that Jacinta recounted, but it was an effortless thing learning from Bas. It was never, he might have been funny in his gruffness, but it was never an intimidating gruffness. It was a natural, easy way. But that was just the beginning of what he was teaching. He was teaching about language because he wanted to teach about culture, and culture, I think, was what was more important to him in many ways than language, even though he was gifted with languages. And he opened our eyes to understand the importance of culture and of friendship. And so as a teacher, as Paul has said, he was in this kind of knowledge diplomacy. He was a diplomat, not your standard issue diplomat, but very much a diplomat, representing not so much the nation of Indonesia as the people of Indonesia. And that, for him, was the important thing. It was about people. He was, I think, he put in all of us a love not just of the Indonesian language and culture, but of the people. And it's a sad thing with occasions like this that we don't really know what we've lost until it's gone. And I think I am guilty of underestimating Bas because he was so genial and modest and humble, and because, as Julian said, he played this role occasionally, well, daily, I suppose, of trickster, of a Samar figure, that it was easy to underestimate just how important and significant a person he was and what a role he played. But it's a lasting legacy for all of us who are concerned about our engagement with Indonesia and the Indonesian people, and an inspiration to try and do something more. Paul spoke about him being a mate, or about being fair dinkum. He occasionally might even have allowed that what he was trying to do and what he was able to do was, as he said himself, pretty bloody buggers. But most of all, he was a humanitarian. One of my favourite words that comes to mind with Bas, which seems like an odd connection, but it's an obvious connection if you know him, is he was a mensch. He was a good guy. He was somebody who was decent and generous with his time, with his friendships, with his resources. The reason he was so effective as a teacher and as this kind of knowledge diplomat was because of this generosity of spirit and heart that sort of was contagious. Another good Indonesian friend of mine, and he reminds me of several very good Indonesian friends, which is one of the best things about the world he opened up to us, had us on his tombstone. He deliberately asked to be written in 3 languages, "Here lies a humanitarian." And that very much fits with Bas. Different people, but very much of that same outlook. And that's the lasting legacy. I wish I'd appreciated him more. I wish I'd spent more time when I had the opportunity. I only now realise just how very special that was. But he's left a lasting legacy on all of us. And one final takeaway, I think, moments like this are always reminders of how short life is. But Bas lived life fully. He seized the moment. He gave generously of his time and his friendships and his resources, and he entered into things. I hadn't realised, or I'd forgotten until I was reminded today by Isabel that he was born on Bastille Day. And when they travelled to France, he really enjoyed not just French food, of course, but speaking French. Not surprising when you think about it, but I hadn't stopped to think about that. And that shows you his humanitarianism. He was in love with people and a lover of people, and he helped us. It was this bridge to love the people of Indonesia, yes, the language, and yes, the nation, but the people first and foremost. And that's a lasting legacy, and it's a tall order for us to live up to as educators, but it's something I think we need to grasp with both hands, because we are not where we should be in Australia in our relationship with Indonesia. And people like Bas have shown us how it can be better and points the way, I hope, to something that's better in future as well.
Thank you for joining us today, Greg. Very heartfelt words, much appreciated by everybody. A memorial service for Pak Bas would be unusual if we didn't hear from some former students. He taught so many, he loved them, he embraced them, he helped them succeed. It's a great pleasure to welcome today Heather Heinstein and Ed Russell to share their reflections.
I began studying with Bas at Monash in 2002, and for me, as for so many of his other students, Bas was a transformative figure, certainly in my education, but also in my life, and that extended well beyond the time that I spent on campus at Monash in Clayton. Bas, the teacher, as has been captured by all the speakers today, was an outrageous and unassailable character from the first lecture at the start of first year all the way through my studies. His humour and his mischief that he brought to every class could transform the driest lesson in Indonesian grammar to an absolute riot. As long as I live, I'll never forget how to conjugate verbs of repetition, because I'll never be able to unhear Bas going through his preposterous mantra of "Saya memukuli anjing itu. Anjing itu dipukuli oleh saya. Anjing itu saya pukuli." In one famous or infamous incident, a student went to Pak Bas's office to complain that despite answering every single question on his mid-semester test, now obviously this is not me, he answered every single question on his mid-semester test correctly. He'd only been given 99%, not the 100 to which he thought he was entitled. When he left Pak Bas's office, he didn't leave with the extra 1% he was hoping for. He left with a lesson. "Mate," Pak Bas said to him, "only two people get 100% in this life. God and Pak Bas." Pak Bas was a great classroom educator, but he was equally passionate, or perhaps, as Greg was saying before, even more passionate about pushing his students to get out of the classroom and learn about Indonesian culture through lived experience. He loved showing the country to his students, and he loved opening up doors for his students over there, whether those doors were to universities across the archipelago, or to internship opportunities in offices around Jakarta, or to old colonial-era Dutch cafes in the mountains high over Bandung. Bas cared deeply about his students and was fiercely protective of them. Bas was a lecturer who would arrive at your hotel after you'd lost 18 kilos over the course of several months of poor food choices, with a frozen pack of 4 and 20 pies and a casual, "What's wrong with you, mate?" Bas was the lecturer who'd come to your aid, or the aid of hapless first-year students, way out of their depth in negotiations with street sellers in the back streets of Yogyakarta. Bas was the master connector and builder of bridges, themes throughout all the speeches today. Ahead of the annual 6-week intensive in-country program in Jogja that Bas set up, I think in the 1980s, but I'll be corrected on that, Bas would fly in a couple of weeks early to interview scores of local students, to hand-select individual tutors for each Monash student. After the day's classes, lectures, seminars were done, each pair would be sent out. Go where you like, go to Malioboro, drink teh botol, play billiards, do whatever you want to do, but do it in Indonesian and get to know each other. As everyone said, Bas's connections throughout Indonesia ran high and low and broadly. I myself saw those with his connections in the presidential palace, among Sundanese performing arts groups, among first responders across Java, and groups of health professionals. All students who followed Bas on one of his Indonesian adventures, I think, had the same light bulb moment, the same realization that all of these preposterous stories of Bas's supreme connectedness at all levels were actually not exaggerations. If anything, they were understatements. When Bas reassured first-year students heading over to Indonesia for the first time and their concerned parents that the Sultan of Yogyakarta had personally guaranteed their safety, that wasn't a sales pitch. That was a message personally delivered by the Sultan to Bas, and it was proved when those students on arrival were welcomed by His Excellency to a function at the Kraton. Bas built those bridges himself, but he also encouraged his students to get out there and build some bridges of their own. Nowadays, I work at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Canberra, where Bas's legacy is warmly and gratefully remembered. His students can be found on every level of the building, and indeed across every department in the capital. When I approached the former Australian ambassador to Jakarta, Bill Farmer, about today's service, he offered the following tribute, which I'd like to end on today. It is right that we honour today a real champion of enriching links between Indonesia and Australia. In numerous fields of endeavour, governmental, cultural, academic, scientific, charitable, religious, and others, many individuals have made outstanding contributions to enhancing our dealings with and understanding of each other. Pak Bas Koesasi, even in this illustrious company, stands out for the sheer range of his interests, activities, and his achievements. A proud Indonesian, a true friend of Australia. With that, Pak Bas, selamat jalan. Terima kasih atas semuanya.
I was a mature-age student studying at Monash in the 90s when I first met Pak Bas. I was following my passion to learn Indonesian, not knowing at that stage where it would take me. Meeting this interesting lecturer, long hair in a plait, moustache, groovy glasses, direct manner, I had no idea then that he would become such a good friend and mentor. Perhaps entering his office at Monash gave me an insight into his unique character. It was like an explosion of Indonesian books and artefacts, from the floor to the ceiling, with artfully arranged bookshelves filling every nook and cranny, and an old chair where the humblest students sat to talk to him, as well as Pak Bas liked to say, future presidents of Indonesia. I think it was Gus Dur who had sat there before he became president. His classes were a joy to behold, with Pak Bas in full flight, telling us jokes and stories in both Indonesian and English, and proving that he was the master of both languages and cultures and could move seamlessly between them. Teaching was his passion, and his students understood this, and it brought out the best in us because we didn't want to let him down. I was fortunate to take part in one of his 6-week intensive Indonesian language courses in 1998-99 at the Gadjah Mada University in Yogyakarta. It was during my time there that I realised Pak Bas's true gift to Indonesian students. He had designed a course that gave his students the most authentic, productive, rewarding experience that could, quite literally, change lives. It changed mine, as I met Indonesian families there who have become lifelong friends, and it inspired me to teach Indonesian and to start a business which took me on frequent visits to Indonesia. It will have done the same for hundreds of students who took part in that course. Bas and I would cross paths regularly in Indonesia, and on those visits, Pak Bas was happy to eat at a simple street warung, or perhaps, as he would explain, he couldn't see me that day as he was having an audience with His Excellency, the Sultan of Yogyakarta. He lived a full and rich life that involved travel to the most exotic places, meeting very important people, and doing amazing work, but he was just as comfortable standing around the barbecue doing his best impersonation of being an Aussie. He could do a fantastic "G'day, mate." On my last visit to Pak Bas, I took my photo album of our language course trip to Jogja and went through it with him. We had some good laughs about the old days, and he was quite animated at seeing photos of old friends and students, all the places he loved in Jogja, and the food that he missed so much. When I was leaving, he was smiling, and I told him that I would come and see him again as soon as I could. His response to me, "Bloody bagus." No one who has been taught by Pak Bas will ever forget him, his unique character, his endless energy to create opportunities for so many, the profound desire he had for promoting the links between his two countries, and his brilliant memory for people and names. Because you see, while we will never forget him, he never forgot any of you. Terima kasih banyak, Pak Bas. Selamat jalan.
Thank you. How nice it is to hear those stories and how real they were and how special Pak Bas was to both of you and, of course, to your many friends and your many students you studied with. Thank you. Well, we could go on, but in drawing this memorial service to a close, I'd like to say thank you to, first, our host, Monash University and the Global Engagement team, the wonderful MSO musicians and today's presenters, thank you. And of course the organising committee, including, I might add, our very diligent COVID Marshal, Alan Kelly. Our thoughts are, of course, with Pak Bas's family. Before we conclude, I would like to note that we are still gathering messages of condolences. If you would like to share a message to be included in the book of condolences, or any memories, photos or videos of Pak Bas, please reach out to the communications team at the Australia-Indonesia Centre. An email address will be posted as part of the recording of this live stream event. To end, a personal reflection. When we think about Australia-Indonesia relations, high-profile names often come to mind. Political names such as Suharto, Whitlam, Alatas, Keating, Yudhoyono, Evans, Jokowi, Bishop. Diplomatic names such as Siagian, Woolcott, Flood, Farmer, McCarthy. Academic names like Feith and Legg. From today, and I say this with conviction, the name Basoeki Koesasi deserves to be elevated to the same level. May the light that was in Bas stay within us. Thank you and stay well.